Does social media need regulation? And if so, what kind of regulation is needed? We'll talk about it next on the StreamLeader Report Live Panel. Let's do a show.
It's the StreamLeader Report Live Panel. Creators talking to creators. Raw, real, and unscripted. And sometimes they say the quiet part out loud. Here are your hosts, Claudia Santiago, Rebecca Gunter, Rob Greenlee, and Ross Brand.
Hey gang, welcome to the StreamLeader Report. I'm Ross Brand. My show is the StreamLeader Report. This is our live panel edition. And joining me, as always, Rebecca Gunter from Business in the Raw, Rob Greenlee, the host of Podcast Tips with Rob Greenlee, and Claudia Santiago, musician, singer, live streamer, band leader from ClaudiaSantiago.com. And with that nice introduction, I can say, Claudia, what the heck is happening now in Canada?
Oh my, oh Canada. Yes, here's my bling hat that I often take on stage with me because as a Chilean immigrant to Canada, I've always been very proud to be Canadian. But what the heck is going on in Canada?
Yeah, so, what is happening? Your prime minister is trying to push a legislation regarding social media that had failed a couple years ago, and he's back at it again. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Well, it's very real. It's not some sort of fluffy thing going on out there. It's really been positioned, and I say that positioned. It's kind of, to be honest with you, it's kind of freaky getting on camera today and talking about this because they've even, the new thing they've added to this is they would criminalize and put you in prison for speaking out on certain things. Now, initially, my understanding is it was put out to protect children in particular from being exploited, any kind of bullying, but also perversion, that kind of thing. You know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to be careful with my words here because of what we can say here. But it was really put out to protect them, which I'm totally for. But they're adding things as we go along, and that's where it gets a little bit dicey. And, I'm going to pull out the old Canada hat again. The thing is where it gets dicey, it's like, okay, these other things that are being added, it's like they want to criminalize, and I get it, hate speech and things like that, which we kind of do need. But then it's like, well, what is considered hate speech? Right. What is considered, just because we don't agree with the reigning prime minister or whatever, is that then all of a sudden? And so it takes me back to, the coup. And it takes me back to, if you did not agree with those that took power, then off to prison you went, and tortured and killed and everything else. So anyways, I'm trying to be careful with my language because I am the only Canadian on the panel. And it's like, okay, is this going to come back and bite me now?
Yeah, we do want to keep you out of jail.
Out of jail.
Well, and it's definitely a red flag to me that we're even concerned about that, right? That just saying, facts about what's actually happening could get you in trouble, right? So, though I don't believe that does Canada have a constitution like in the US? I don't believe that they do, around the right to free speech, right?
Nobody really has a First Amendment like the US does. I don't
Right.
think of the major sort of Western
There
countries.
There are things though, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are things that are put in place that are you know, some bills and constitution type things. So for example, and you know, I'm not gonna get into the debate here, but whichever way you swing here, but you know, during our CVID days, and then some people were like, yeah, this is a bunch of BS, we're gonna protest against it, which is public protest, but right away it got deemed as this is violent, this is that, and to the point where they shut down people's bank accounts.
Yeah.
So this is where it does get concerning. I'm all for let's protect the younger ones. Let's protect this next generation. There's too much crap on the internet, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. I mean, Rebecca, what do you think?
Well, as a mother of a 16-year-old, I had a very interesting conversation with my kids just last week about social media, and I was surprised to hear them say, I don't think any kid should be on the internet before 13. There's a lot of stuff out there. And I was surprised to hear them say that, because so far it's been like this kind of campaign for, like, you know, open access and connecting with the world outside, particularly around the pandemic, where that's where the only social relationships were really happening for school age kids. And to have somebody who, like, pretty much had a lot of freedom around that say, I don't think it's a good idea. I was surprised by that. Certainly, like, the access to everything is just unbelievably immediate. And while I'm generally like a laissez-faire kind of, not like benign neglect, but I don't get wrapped up too tightly or about helicoptering my kids' exposure to things I think are too grown up for them. I'd rather have a conversation about it. But even that one was like, no.
Right.
Yeah, I think also the whole issue of access is not something that's being talked about as part of this debate. You know, I think that there was a law that was passed. I think it was COPA, I think was the acronym for it, that was that limited children's access, and this was a legal thing that limited children's access to the internet until they reached the age of 13. But I don't know if that law is being enforced anymore, or if people even know about it anymore. I know that a lot of the early technology companies had to adhere to this COPA law and create pathways for children over the age of 13, and then more limited pathways for children under the age of 13. But I'm not sure that this is what this whole issue is all about, is around access. I think that the powers that be want to continue access for children, and that is almost like it's a right, but it's also a pathway for the government to monitor and surveil conversations from that generation as well. So, you know, that's the real danger of this is this hate designation that it's happening here in the US too, has been expanding to mean a lot of different things than what I remember hate speech to mean, you know, even 5 years ago. You know, now it's like, if there's anything that somebody disagrees around health outcomes or health solutions, that's considered hate speech. Or if it's talking about gender, or if it's talking about sexual orientation, it's like, I mean, those have never been considered to be hate speech in the past, but all of a sudden now they are. Yeah. So you have to wonder.
I think I'm never a fan of when bills try and stuff everything into one package, right? And is the motivation to protect children, or is the motivation propaganda, misinformation,
that's the
and
real
so
agenda,
forth,
right?
Which seems to be the real agenda, given, you know, the way things are going in our Western countries. Sadly, that's the way things are going. And clearly, the only misinformation you should be able to to access is that which the government wants you to access. You can get the government's lies, but you can't. How dare you get a challenge to those lies, whether it's truthful or not. And I don't remember growing up ever there being such a fear about propaganda and misinformation. It was sort of like the idea was there's an open market here, and if you don't like one idea, go find another one, or go speak another one, or go educate yourself, or let's prove this wrong. And now the attempt to prove something wrong is being, as Claudia said, it's kind of being deemed as hatred or as propaganda, misinformation, when in fact, the government doesn't have such a great track record, right?
Right.
And this is what separates us from autocracies and, totalitarian governments and so forth. As far as the children's issue goes, I agree with your daughter, Rebecca. I if it was up to me, I think nobody under 16 would be allowed on social media, period.
I mean, it's really
think
a tough call. Sorry, Ross.
Yeah, there's so much momentum and social pressure amongst young people now.
The only
beyond
And
way-
that
also,
platform.
these are the.
Right.
Sorry, Ross.
No, go ahead. I'm just going to say the only way that this works is if schools, parents, or government lay down restrictions. Otherwise, nobody's going to be the only parent that keeps their kid from being able to socialize in the way every other kid is socialized and connected. You're basically telling your kid you're going to be out of it, right? It was so, but we all know that it would be better for kids to form relationships with each other in person, not
right.
online. And if there are issues and problems, bullying, whatever, you get to leave school at the end of the day. You get to retreat back into your safe home with your family. You have some time in your own mind to develop your imagination. I can't tell you, like, on Friday, I had a long drive. I had to go out to Pennsylvania at about 2.5+ hour drive, both ways, right? It was nice to have all that time to, like, just think about things that had nothing to do with what was on social media or work.
Right.
I explored some different radio stations. I mean, it was nice. And kids have been robbed of that. I mean, remember all the games we would make up in our head and, things like that? I think there's so many dangers, but the dangers are not just crazy predators or misinformation. The danger is how their brains develop and how their socialization develops. And 16-year-olds are too young for some, below 16 at least. I mean, I think we would never get it past at 18, or I would say up to 18, but certainly not before 16. And basically these apps are grooming people to grooming children to become lifelong, the pusher wants to start young, right? So you get people addicted to social media and thinking that this is where they have to be and how many likes they get and all this stuff is important. Well, now you've got an adult who's hooked for life because it's the only way they know how to communicate and experience interactions with other people, how to validate themselves. So I think that would be the start. If somebody really cares about the dangers of social media, it would be the start to say, why don't we take it away from children for now? Because until we feel that it's a safe place for adults, it clearly isn't a safe place for children.
Well, but Ross, the slippery slope of that is that making it safe also means more regulation and controls and moderation of discussion and topics, and that's where the challenge comes in. Is
lies the problem.
If we're looking to government to dictate what can or cannot be said on these public platforms, but also the other issue with children is that, as you look to the future, technology and information communications are skills that these children are going to need to have to be successful in the world. So it's it's a slippery slope going both ways, right?
That's
I think at the
that's
end
what
of
I
the
was
day,
gonna say.
yeah,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it gets back to what our values are, right? And I think from a high level perspective, that's the battle, that's the struggle that's going on in this country right now. It's a struggle between more conservative values and more liberal values, right? And that's where the fundamental struggle is, and it's going on all around the world. It's not just in the U.S. It's going on in Canada. It's going on. I talked to a friend of mine in the U.K. this morning, and they're going through the same exact things that we're going through, and I'm sure most of Europe is going through that. Though I would say that some of the Scandinavian countries are pushing back on some of these things, and not because it's a different culture up in Scandinavia. They kind of have their own ideology and their own ways of doing things, and that doesn't necessarily align with how things are done typically in the West. So, so this is a much bigger issue than just children. This is an issue of how we as a society move forward, right? And with AI technology and with these new platforms, I mean, if you look at the Apple Vision Pro, that's a glimpse into the future too. That is a little bit, you start thinking about the context of what we're talking about in the context of children living in augmented realities and virtual realities more. And these lines are going to just completely blur to oblivion, right, around reality and artificial reality. And I think that's where a lot of this concern around topics and discussion, but it is a little bit of I hate to say, but there is some element of mind control going on here around people feeling like self-censoring themselves. I'm seeing it happen more and more and more all the time. The self-censoring, saying, well, I can't say this and I can't say that, and I can't talk about this and I can't talk about that. It's increasingly happening in the podcasting space. It's increasingly happening online. And
it's been around
tough.
longer than people think, because
it has. It's been gradually building. Right.
When I joined Facebook, it was the end of 2012, beginning of 2013.
Yep.
And I made a commitment that I wasn't going to do anything political on Facebook. And I had not done anything political on Twitter and LinkedIn, which I had already been on for 6 months to a year. And basically, other than what we discuss in this show, I've kept to that for 12 years. And so I was feeling like in 2013, people didn't really want to hear views that were different from their own, right? And that could cost you customers, friends, opportunities. And there's a time for speaking up, but I don't think the way I wanted to do that was in a random Facebook post or because I felt like venting for a moment and that would feel good. And then, damn the consequences, except 2 hours later, I'm sort of like, well, good, Ross, you made yourself feel really good with that comment.
Right.
Now,
Rebecca, you had something to say.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh,
As it shows up to haunt you, Ross, like 25 years later. I still think there's a disconnect that people don't understand how much their digital footprint can really affect the decisions in their future, like a job interview, at the least, housing.
Yep.
Like I know Gen Xers always say like, God, internet wasn't around when I was coming up. Like that's serious for sure.
I mean, that's a big reason why I talk on this topic. I talk really high level. I don't get specific into certain sides or issues that would be considered to be hateful to anyone. I think it's more taking a position that is really inclusive of everyone's thoughts and opinions, but also like what's being talked about here, this recognition that there are harms being done to especially young people that haven't had the opportunity to develop their mental abilities to be able to make their own choices and make their own decisions based on their own values. And that's what's really under threat here is individuals with their own values are being weaponized against them, that they can't have those values. They have to have someone else's values and or thoughts, and not their own thoughts, even though it may be contrary to what other people think, which is really the whole point of a free speech world, is that all of us are free to think independently, not think as a collective. And that leads us into a whole nother concern, but that's, and as we get more connected electronically, that groupthink starts to really take hold. And if certain thoughts get weaponized or pushed to the side because they're considered to be hate speech, then we all start moving towards this concept of we all think the same way. But, is that, if we all thought the same way, would that make a better world? That's the question that I think we all have to think about.
No, because you have power dynamics, right? So thinking all the same way then just supports whatever those who are in charge, those with the biggest stick, those with the biggest business want.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to enforce that.
Yeah.
That was the brilliance of the First Amendment, and
right.
But they didn't picture a time coming along when there'd be a cancel culture, and I probably also don't think they probably could have imagined the diversity of views and different ways of communication that we all have.
Yeah.
We all have today. I think on the issue of kids, like, there is the concern Rebecca mentioned, and you mentioned, or Rebecca nodded her head. I forget whether you brought it up or not, but I know you're there with Rob on this, that, kids need access to these tools because we live in a digital world and you can't, but I think you can have computers at school, let's say, that have access to ChatGPT and access to do online research and such, but that can be separate from having a Facebook account or an Instagram account or, being on TikTok or whatever. And while we don't want the government to get overly involved in regulating things, I think this could be sort of how government works in the best way. If parents and even teenagers, there was a groundswell that, came from the people and moved up through their representatives, pushing them to do something, because we're all in agreement that you can't have a world in which some kids have access to this and other kids don't, because it's always going to be an unfair playing field, I think, for... It's just going to be like
so well with gun control.
Yeah, but kids don't have guns, right? I mean,
some of them do.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
But I'm just saying,
it's a public opinion.
I want to.
No. But I'm talking about, like, kids living in different. Like, you can't have a class where 3/4 of the kids are living are socializing on TikTok or whatever, and then another third have no access to it whatsoever. Because it's just parental. Eventually, those parents are going to wear down and go, I don't want my kid to be a complete outsider. If that's the place where their peers are socializing, it's important for them. So only if the parents come together as an overwhelming group and say, look, we all agree that it would be better for our kids if they weren't on these platforms until they were 16 or 17 or whatever the age we determine. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to make a perfect world, but I don't know. I mean, Rebecca, you've probably seen more than I have the impact that it has, good, bad, and neutral, I guess, right?
Well, I guess I'll say
I'm not asking you to bring your personal situation. I'm just saying, like, in general.
I think that there's a piece of raising kids that's about protecting them from things and also like a mitigated exposure. I can only imagine that if I had not let my kid get on any social media platform until 18, and then the day that 18 comes around, and then they have no idea what
Right?
grooming looks like, they don't know,
Yeah.
they're obsessed. Like, I think that there is a little bit of a contextualization that can help. Not to the point of my kids saying, like, I think 13 is too young. I mean, the things that they were exposed to just from taking grandpa's phone at 8 years old, like hardcore stuff, and then having to explain that, it was traumatizing, but also, to the point of it being the tools of our time and like what happens when you do turn 18. I do have a very interesting add to your point of like imagination and having time to think. When Saturn was like between ages of second grade to almost high school, we were in it's called Sudbury Valley model. It's an open campus, no teachers. I call it free range chickens. No teachers, no testing, no classes. You were all just to go out on this 12-acre campus and get bored, and then start collaborating together on small projects. With the introduction of technology into the Sudbury Valley model, no one gets bored. So like that isn't happening because they have phones and iPads and devices and switches. And so the social experiment of let's put a bunch of kids together in a safe environment and see how they start like building, villages in the woods and stuff isn't happening anymore. And that is a loss, I think. So that's a long-winded way of addressing kind of all of those things of saying it's complicated.
Yeah.
Of course.
I just want to bring something up with, when the movie Sound of Freedom came out, a lot of us were exposed to how, grooming, but also, all the criminal activity, if I can word it that way, to do with children was happening and has been happening for so long. And now, this is where I go. Okay, the government is trying to control social media and all of that. I get that, to protect the children. But here's the thing. The porn industry has been going on forever. And most of those kids that we saw in that movie are ones that are on those sites. They just dress them up, put on the makeup, and make them look like they're of age. Most of those girls are underage. So the porn industry thrives on that and the trafficking. And that's how they make their money. What most people don't realize, and those that are consumers in the porn industry, they don't realize that they're engaging in the very activity that the government's trying to censor social media. Okay. So we've got a dilemma there, and the answer isn't to censor the social media as much as actually helping people overcome addiction, whether they're porn addicted or other types of addiction. It's like a Band-Aid to me than rather getting to the root issue. So it's not just, people posting things about kids or whatever. It's the consumers. It's the addiction thing with people. So there's one issue. Another issue is like, I as I was researching all this, I actually heard on one of the interviews on, I can't remember, it was CTV or whatever. It was a news outlet. And it was a mom. It was a woman whose child was raped, molested as a toddler. Okay. Now, this young girl is now a bit older, but all those pictures are online. These predators not only violated her, but they now are making money off of her, the videos and pictures they took of her. So now you've got this young, beautiful little girl growing up as a woman, and they can't take that stuff off. So this girl is highly traumatized. So that's where I go, okay, that's where, if a country wants to protect the kids in that way, I can see that. But this whole other thing where, consumers in the porn industry absolutely turn a blind eye to the fact that most of those women or men in the things they consume are all children. So that's a reality, and I think that's where the help needs to come to the root issue well, it's a combination, I think. And then I think what kind of floors me about this is that it's really interesting how all the systems on social, Facebook hires a new group of people to censor hate speech or whatever. It all comes around close to the elections. Hello. Is that I think I know that what the whole protecting our children thing is a real thing. But I think there's a bigger agenda to this. I really think that this is a lot more politically driven. And, it really smells like what was happening during the coup, where they censored things. And if you spoke against anything, you were offed. And so Canada is now, the fact that they're saying we can criminalize, put you in jail. And get this, I don't know if you guys read this, but I was digging into it. But whoever files a complaint can remain completely anonymous.
So you can't face your accuser. You don't have to face your accuser. You can't face the accuser,
and you also can't verify if that's legit. Hello.
It opens the door to really kind of any kind of controls. Right.
Lifetime imprisonment. Who's the judge on the throne to judge that? Who is going to be, again, it takes me back to communism, where the people put in place were all working under the new communist regime. So again, where's the agendas here? And really, was this bill put in place just to protect the kids and the prostitution industry, or are they setting up Canada up for something completely different? Oh, and the fact that they can change whenever they want what constitutes hate speech, what constitutes genocide, what constitutes, that's all.
I want to say a quick hello. Comic Crusaders is here. Brian Shulman. Yes. Good to see you both. And I'm bringing a comment here from Blackboard Rules on the Netflix documentary Social Dilemma. And I had Netflix for a month just to watch that documentary. The CEOs interviewed said they wouldn't let their children have accounts on social media because they know how it works.
Right. Yeah, I saw that as well. Yeah. And that's exactly how it works. It's all algorithm focused, right? It's designed to keep you coming back to it repeatedly and repeatedly. It's mentally, it's kind of like mentally stimulating, or they use this term dopamine, creates a dopamine response in the brain. And that's what's happening with TikTok too. So
like a drug, and then how AI has made it so very easy to take one person, a human being who's completely innocent, and create AI versions of them without clothing on, in compromising positions. So I understand where there needs to be some internet policing here, but it's concerning what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm not sure where this ends up, but it's a significant shift in what's happening, and I think the proper term to describe it is we're moving into an era that would be defined as a technocracy, and it's somewhat new, but some of the principles of it do have historical reference behind it, and some of the principles behind it are slowly starting to be realized by increasing numbers of people, that this has a historical reference to it, but it also has something new in it, and that's this technology layer, right? That enables people to communicate with each other on a global scale, but it also enables the people in power to monitor that and control that. So we're kind of in a new era, and it's hard somewhat. I hear a lot of people talk about, like a historical reference to, well, we've seen this in the past. I don't know that we've really seen this in the past. I think what the changes that are happening in our society, in the West especially, but also are happening in the East as well, are really, a lot of the things that people have wanted to do haven't been possible until the technology reached a certain level of, integration in our society. And I think a lot of our governments have wanted to enforce laws in a greater degree. And so if they can expand the laws to cover more things where they feel like there's risk in the society, but it seems like it's having the opposite effect, though. It's driving people apart and angering people against each other. And I don't know that is that really what our government wants? Is everybody at each other's throats?
To sell advertising, I mean?
Well, also, this concept of fear and this concept of polarization plays into the hands of power. That's just, I'm not taking a side here. I'm just saying that polarization plays into power dynamics. And oftentimes the sides are fighting over power and control over the other side that doesn't agree with them. So we're creating a potential environment of real world conflict. That's the real danger that I'm worried about. And I'm increasingly hearing that from others, is that we're fomenting violence in our society against each other on all these lines of understanding and divide. Good people and bad people, each side thinks the other side is bad. And once that happens, violence is not far behind.
Still, are they wrong or are they evil? And, people can be wrong without being evil. And that was the idea behind things, right? We can disagree and then we try and come to some sort of consensus or what have you. Rebecca, you had a video. It deals with from social media from the creator side, right?
I do. If you're ready for some mirth.
Yeah, let's go to it.
Okay, this one there we go. All right.
Everyone's a creator. It seems like everyone has a following and everything is hashtag content. Social media companies have made these apps more addictive than ever by letting everyone go viral all the time and making every person feel like they're famous. They've essentially outsourced their labor to millions of people without any financial compensation. It's all an illusion of fame and influence with none of the monetary benefits. I have almost 600,000 followers across TikTok and Instagram, and I still have to work a totally separate career that has nothing to do with comedy. I'm not trying to complain. I just think it's genuinely indicative of the state of social media. You can buy your way to 1 million followers and no one will know. The second you stop creating, someone younger, hotter, and more entertaining will replace you. I'm one of at least 100 corporate comedians just with the same stupid haircut, rehashing the same tired work topics over and over again. I'm falling into their trap right now. We're totally saturated, and there's no indication that we're ever going back. A lot of children only want to be influencers when they grow up. Everyone describes themselves these days as a hashtag digital creator, writer, producer, editor, director, podcaster, and also a realtor. Well, time to stop creating content and start creating some value for shareholders. Everyone's
That was very good. So are we also
too, right?
The adults that we are we also victims of algorithms and social media mind control and the rewards and promises of a business model that doesn't actually reward us in the way it's supposed to?
I mean, that's also the other side of it, is also us pushed to be creators. I mean, I think his point of like, they've outsourced their labor for millions of dollars and no one's getting paid for it. Shout out to Tom Fell, by the way, who I think produces incredible TikTok humor for sure about being a creator. But without that funnel, You need that funnel in order to make the supernova equation of, you know, our children being damaged by social media, etc. Our adults being damaged. Should it be regular? Should it not be? The push for people to constantly enroll themselves in their role is pretty relentless. We're all here.
Creativity is such a gift, and in during the coup, when everything got shut down, people got pulled out of buildings and taken to torture camps. Families did not have food. Electricity was shut down whenever the heck they wanted to. Running water, all of that. Really, a resilience was built up in people because they had the creativity. They had one another. They had creativity. So I think we'd be foolish, and I don't say this in any degrading way, I think we'd be foolish not to continue creating, using the tools in our hands, learning new technology. And I'm saying learning it, not being afraid of it. I think we'd be foolish to do that, because the reality is, just like here in Canada, you know, bank accounts were shut from one day to the next. In Argentina, when they had the bankruptcies 3 times, and people lost all their life savings. In Chile, where they, all of a sudden, all the borders were closed. So what I say is creativity is such a gift. It's a God-given gift to all of us. And we have that power and choice. So even though somebody may take the power from us, we have this within us. And that's what I encourage everybody to, is don't live in fear. You know, don't try to hide or run from technology. Look at the good in it. Look at what you can do with it. And whatever the governments decide to do or not to do, I think that we can rise above. Yes, like through the war and the coup, there were things we couldn't do. If those sirens went off, we had to run for cover. If we did not run for cover, it didn't matter where. I remember holding my mom's hand and running into homes where we did not know people. Okay. But those that were on the streets, you could hear the machine guns going. And then when you were outside the house, you saw bodies everywhere. Okay. So that's what coups do. That's what military coups do. That's what overthrows do. That's what communism does. So, but this is the thing, is in my home country, their resiliency and their creativity, they're such a creative people, has gotten their economy back up. And I remember my uncles today, they'll hold 2 or 3 jobs, and they've created work for themselves. So I just want to throw that as an encouragement, because all that we're talking about, and I mean, I'm the only Canadian in the panel. And honestly, I had to look at, like, okay, are they gonna like censor our panel because I've got something to bring to the table? Is there gonna be someone knocking at my door and hauling me away? Like, what's gonna happen here? So, but I can't live in fear of that, you know. Anyways,
and it's not, you know, and it's not an isolated, like, you could just say, well, that's Canada, because it could be something I say or something Rebecca or Rob says that gets you in trouble. And it's like, you know, well, what? Okay, so now it's not just infringing on free speech of Canadians, but it's making Americans and people in other countries who are engaging with people from Canada reluctant to cross certain lines, just like we're reluctant to say certain things on YouTube because we don't want the channel to get shut down. So there's a whole dance that goes on in terms of how we're self-censoring and so forth. And I don't know that anything's being lost, but there's going to come a time where there'll be a topic that we want to cover, and we're between government, between popular opinion, between the platforms and self-interest, you know, our day job and what have you, that we're just going to go, maybe this is a tough one. Maybe this is one we don't want to cover. And
exactly. And, I'm just going to say this too, for Canadians, like how many Canadians are going to lose work because let's say a media company wants to bring them on board as a brand ambassador or as a panelist or whatever, they're going to think twice. Ooh, if we bring that Canadian in, how restricted are we going to be? Do you see what I'm saying? Like this, it puts jobs and jeopardizes opportunities for Canadians. And then also I have friends who are Jewish. Some people were born in Israel and they're scared for their lives sometimes to even go out. And so even if I bring that up, is that going to constitute that I have a role in some kind of genocide? You see what I'm saying? Like, where are the lines? And this is where we go, okay. And then the fact that they can make up the rules whenever they want. Yeah, I feel like I'm back in Chile.
Well, it's all keyed on fear. That's if fear can be fomented in a society, people will be much more willing to, conform.
Right.
Because they feel threatened or their safety is just like we just said. If people are fearful to go outside of their houses, guess what? They're going to stay in their house
and order things on Amazon and get Uber Eats and
stay quiet.
Spend money.
Stay in a box. Stay quiet. Go build a shelter.
Yeah. Spend more time on their iPhones or their computers or in the Apple Vision Pro. I mean, I could very much see a future where there will be a certain segment of the population that will choose to live their lives in virtual reality than live in the real world, because the real world will be not as pleasant a place to be as the virtual world. And I think that may be what the future looks like. Because we're kind of seeing that a little bit today, right? People what's their screen time today, right? It's oftentimes
it's humiliating to get that number on the app. Like your screen time is up 20%. You watch 7 hours a day. And I'm like, please tell me it's for work.
Right.
Right. And then you got the whole segment that are like, well, real relationships aren't built online and I'm just like cutting it all off and I'll go work my 9 to 5. I'm fine. I'll come home, cook my dinner and put my feet up. Okay. Well, that's all good. Like whatever, my experience is when communism rolls in is you don't have a 9 to 5 job anymore, baby. And if you don't have tools under your belt, hello, good luck. That's why I say we can't live in fear. And I will say this, that because of my investing, I choose to invest my time online in the things that I do. That's, to me, that is not just Claudia going, oh, I'm addicted to scrolling. No, I actually choose to learn and invest my time online, invest my time in people. Guess what? When we do meet face to face, we have a better relationship than anything I try to conjure up with meeting someone face to face for the first time. So there's validity. I don't buy into that camp that just turns a blind eye and says, oh, social media is just like whatever. You know what? When you choose, you actually choose and you're intentional about building your relationships in any way, shape, or form, it's a win.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've chosen to, by default, right? I would always, if I just had some time to waste or needed a distraction, by default, I would always open up Instagram or Twitter. And I made a conscious decision, and it's changed a lot for me, that now I'm going to open up LinkedIn. And if I'm going to scroll content, I'm going to scroll content on LinkedIn. If I'm going to comment somewhere on somebody else's content, it's going to be on LinkedIn. And if I only have 10 minutes to post, or I'm only going to post once today on a topic or something, I'm thinking LinkedIn first. And then, okay, maybe I'll get to the other ones. Whereas in the past, it's like if it's a picture, it goes to Instagram. If it's a text based update, it goes to Twitter. And then, you know, maybe if I'm promoting something, I'll throw up a post on LinkedIn to cover all bases. But I'm like, you know, I've never really given LinkedIn, other than that short period when LinkedIn Live was hot. I've never really given LinkedIn a fair chance where I've thought in terms of, hey, these are real people in a real community, and like, am I like, I know how to tailor a post for Twitter or for Instagram, but have I ever really thought about what I'm putting on LinkedIn? Not really. It's like, let's do a promotional post and just hit LinkedIn as all the bases. Or it's like, well, this was really good, so I'll add it to my profile, or I'll post it on LinkedIn because it's like a resume, and here, you know. But no, like, I'm thinking about it differently, and I think, like, it isn't we should disappear from social media, but how do we use it in a way that helps us achieve our goals, or in a way that keeps us from getting addicted by changing our patterns up? And that's been a major pattern break for me. I'm not scrolling photos on Instagram very much anymore. And if I start to, it's like, oh, wait, you committed to LinkedIn first, and then you can check out the other. You know, by the time I'm done with whatever I'm doing on LinkedIn, I'm usually back to doing something else.
Exactly. It's a purpose. It's a legacy. And that's what I'm talking about. And, you know, I had an interview with Joey Garrity, which I know, Rebecca, you did too. And I got to check that out. But, you know, like, I talked about being you and celebrating the you. And this isn't a narcissistic thing, because it's actually a lot of work to figure out who you are, what you have to bring to the table, to solve problems, to pour into people. And you see, that's a legacy for me, that I cared about people. The things that I developed were intentional to pour into people's lives, to bring value. One of my mentors always said to me, you know, Claudia, I have a network, but, you know, don't you ever treat people like a number. They are people. Like, our investment time here with one another. When I get to meet Ms. Rebecca Gunter face to face, this girlfriend is gold. I know that we are going to be able to dive deep into that pond and go, hey, girl, you know, why? Because we've intentionally invested time in one another and found the gold there, and found that thing that we can celebrate. So yes, I just say, you know, this is where this whole thing comes back around to knowing who you are, to being intentional, and what is your legacy? What are you leaving behind? Well, I'll just say this: I was never scared to tech. And the reason I wasn't scared to tech is because I cared enough about the people out there that I wanted to communicate with, and I wanted to pour in and invest in, and let that be part of my legacy, right?
Let's close up on a constructive note. As I mentioned, my LinkedIn first approach. What's something you could share that you're doing, or that you'd like to do, that you think would allow you to manage social better versus being managed by the algorithms or by social media? Whoever wants to go, just jump in.
Yeah, I can talk about how I use social media, and it's definitely evolved. I mean, I started using this stuff a long time ago, and I've kind of pulled back from treating it as any social media right now as a personal kind of public distribution pathway. Right? It's been really more focused on kind of career and business activities, but also just trying to do things and connect with people in an individual way, but also in a larger way as well, around some of the things that I'm doing with media just in general. So in some ways, maybe I'm not doing what I should be doing, which is really kind of fostering community more, which is, I think, a big trend right now. I think that increasingly, if you're involved in social media or creating content now, I think you need to start changing your way of thinking away from building audiences to building community. And I think that is that is a powerful transition in your mind about how you build one-to-one connections with others through media, and then also communicate positive and reinforcing ideas and concepts to that community, and be reachable, and to be open to other people and their desires and their wishes and their own careers and their own path, and being a resource to help in that. Now, granted, it's not easy to do that if you have a lot of people that are part of your community. It's hard to fulfill everyone's needs, but that's the challenge that I think that we all have as creators, is to better build community and better build individual connections with people that are connecting with you on these platforms.
Question just to keep in mind for a future show is whether the major social media platforms are the best places to build those communities, or whether there are other lesser known platforms
I think there
that
are,
might have
Ross.
advantages to building community.
Yeah. Ross, I think there are.
I think
you're
that's
right.
a whole show in of itself, but it's an interesting topic.
Yeah.
Rebecca, did you have a final thought on this?
Oh my God, I'm following your lead. I still find social media so performative. There's just something so hard to achieve authenticity on LinkedIn, even though I really try and I work in that space and I make over people's profiles on their personal brand. It just feels like I have to do it. And that's the way you are in business. So I'm looking to you. I'm looking at y'all on this panel to help me develop a relationship with it where I just don't feel like it's so performative. I just have to check a box.
It's a concern that, like, after a year, at the end of the year, I might just say, hey, I gave it all I could. And, I don't know if I gave it all I could, but I at least made an effort to show up regularly, and it didn't work for me, or maybe it will. I'm too new to it to this to be able to judge yet. Claudia?
Well, we wouldn't be together, I don't think, if it wasn't for social. Start there, right? And this panel would not have formed either if Ross hadn't pursued putting together a product on social. So that's number 2. Number 3 is there are ways we can distribute content, which we know we can use all kinds of distribution systems so that we don't personally have to be in there all the time, because we're not superhuman, and we've got to remember that. Now, when we do distribute content, there is a responsibility to respond and so what I personally do is sometimes I'm in a season where I feel like I don't want to use my distribution systems, nor, the help that I get, that I want to personally go in there and invest my time. Okay. And do, if I see Ross, I'll go in there and support a post. If I see Rebecca, same with, okay. But there's a season, where maybe I'm touring more, or really, honestly, I'm having social burnout and I want to take time off. So that's when those systems kick in, or when my helpers kick in. It's like, you handle that, for a while. So I think, because we got to remember we're still human, guys, is showing up doesn't mean we have to be on every platform and hands-on. There's seasons for that. But I do think that we would not know one another and the richness and gold that's in one another, and celebrate and laugh and do all the things that we do had social media not been a part of our lives.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, this was very, very interesting conversation. There's so many layers to social media, whether it's the government side and control, whether it's kids, whether it's how creators use it. Obviously, a lot more to talk about. And that's why you come back for the StreamLeader Report Live Panel on Thursdays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. For Claudia Santiago, Rob Greenlee, and Rebecca Gunter, I'm Ross Brand, and this has been the StreamLeader Report. Take care, everybody.